Hello
Good luck,
everyone,
guys.
and welcome to round 2 of the MCEC. And this race was on Granite on the rain, and it was in sports cars. And the race here is about to start in about 2 seconds or so. And as you see, TS Nobody doesn't move at all. His controller died at at some point before the race had started, and he couldn't get it plugged back in. So he was just sitting there. And I managed to jump Tyler at the start because I believe he had to swerve around TS Nobody, which meant he couldn't just really have a good start. And so I got up into second, and we're only like 20 seconds into the race. So it's been pretty good so far. All I have to do is get past Jodler, and I could probably, potentially, just drive away. I felt really good going into this race. I was really comfortable with the track and the car, and the rain as well was something I was really good with as well. Um, so, yes. So I try, as you see, a couple overtake attempts on Jodler early. Um, I was unable to sort of, what would be the word here? To get comfortable with the car immediately in the race. I had practiced completely on my own for this race. I didn't practice with anyone, so I hadn't really prepared myself for battling on this track. And there, Shrek goes for a dive for some reason, and then he gets himself caught with traffic behind, and obviously you saw Aiden overtook me there because I was driving like crap. Um, but that's okay. So far, we're still behind. If I can just get warmed up to the race, I should be okay. As long as I don't fall behind anyone else at this point. But I do have a little bit of a gap behind me. It's not much, a couple car lengths maybe, but it's still enough to give me the space I need to warm up. So this carries on for a few laps. And during this time, GT Driver uh, manages to catch up. He was starting at the very last grid slot in 9th place, and he had time over the first few laps to capitalize on, me not really being able to capitalize on my good start up to this point. So GT Driver is the car directly behind me as I'm trying to get past Aiden. And I managed to do it right here as he goes wide into the barrier there. That's very awkward when you hit it. And I just keep my line here, and he has to back out. So now he's in third, and GT Driver's in fourth. And now I can try and catch up to Jodler, who is in first place, and he's a reserve driver for Icy this week. Who couldn't make it, or was too busy trying to sweat for the next race. I don't know. Um, anyways, so it does take me a little bit of a while to catch him, and when we do, we have a pretty nice battle actually, and eventually a GT Driver does dispatch of Aiden, who was in front of him. And we have quite a nice battle for a few laps here in the early stages of the race for the lead in GT2, which is quite nice. But I did have a plan going into this race. I figured if I can get, at this point, in front of Jodler before GT gets caught up to us, then Jodler can defend from GT Driver and I can drive away. Because Jodler did a pretty good job of defending, at least from me. It took me a while to get past him, and now I'm just showing some little bits and highlights of our little battle in the lead, because I was a newbie and couldn't get past him at all. In this first part of the race, I did struggle with overtaking my GT2 competitors, which showed in this early part of the race. But that's okay at this point, because if I can just wait for Jodler to make a mistake that I can capitalize on, which I've tried a few times, but then he kind of slid back just enough into me a few times where I wasn't able to capitalize on the door he opened because he closed it on me within a quick amount of time. But now we're about 10 laps, 11 laps into the race, sorry. And as you can see, GT driver is approaching from behind. He's the dot there, maybe a second and a half or two behind us. And he's about to join the battle at this point for the last couple laps. Just been me and Jodler up front, but we've been slowing each other down. And now we have a GT3 car just a little bit ahead on the road, which only takes us about another lap or so to catch up to at this point. So I do try here. We're pretty close, and it's quite nice, this battle, even though it doesn't last overall too much longer. As you see, I made a mistake there on the bush. I tried to capitalize going on the inside, but he kind of slid back into place, and I couldn't get it done, unfortunately. I tried to cut the corner tight there, but it just didn't happen there. And now we're lapping dirty. And I think he knows to just let us through. Let us do our thing in this battle. Because it's quite intense this early on, as I was saying, because me and GT driver have sort of been the front runners so the first two races. There hasn't really been anyone consistently close to us, is what I want to say. Because Blaine County was okay, but Olympic, we were just way far ahead of everyone else at the end of the race. So this is where things get a little plot twist. So there's a little bit of contact between me and Jodler, and I end up on my roof, as you would expect me to, because, why not? So Jodler waits for me, though. He didn't need to. I sort of just touched him. He didn't do anything to, have to wait for me. But he decided to wait for me anyways, and he took his pit stop. So I'm thinking, okay, there's a good and a bad to this. GT driver's ahead of me, which is bad, but I'm ahead of Jodler now, and I can just put in the pace, the laps, to try and catch up to GT, because it's only a few seconds ahead at this point in time, so it's not too bad. And I did have the overall best lap in practice by a couple tenths of a second. So I was feeling really good about this race. I had the pace for once in practice. So my plan is, if I can just catch up to GT driver, I'll be okay. And at this point in time, the GT1s have caught up to us. Ryan had already passed us, and this is Brinka and Elusive, I think, or Flaming, I don't know. But in this race, I just I didn't really give them, well, I don't know how to say this. I gave them the line if they went for the overtake, but I didn't, go out of my way to just give them the space, But, and that was the only spot there where I slowed down a little bit so Elusive could go through without issue. That was the only part of the track, and only did it twice, where I slowed down for GT1 that was overtaking me on that corner, because I'd rather them get ahead of me before the quarry section, so that I could just not have to worry about them behind me trying to overtake me during that section, because it's not really an overtaking zone. But now we're catching up to the actual GT3 pack. Dirty was pretty far behind. He was very, what would be the word here? He just gave it to the GT1s. He kind of pulled off to the side, slowed himself down a lot, and he fell back pretty far early on in that first wave of being lapped by the GT1s. And then you have the rest of the GT3 field at this point we're catching up to for the first time. And I overtake Happy G-Ster here on that little section there. And during this time, me and GT Driver have basically pulled a repeat at the moment of round 2, where I get into the lead very briefly for like a split second on this race, and then he pulls a 3 or 4 second gap to me, and it just stays like that until this moment here. And GT Driver takes his first pit stop, and that is where he kind of shot himself in the foot. By taking the pit stop when he did, he ended up battling with Aiden because they came out the same part of the track at the exact same time. And what happened to GT Driver afterwards is I guess he got into a couple battles, he had some incidents, and he got slowed down quite a lot. And this just basically allowed me to run my own strategy at this point, because I like to pit late, because it usually, you'll have the clean air you need behind you about an hour into the race. And that's when you get that clean air behind you where you can pit, and you don't have to worry about another GT2 car being close enough behind you to the point where you're going to have to battle with them. And I think that's where GT Driver made his initial mistake. It was when doing that. So at this point, I do have a little bit of a scary moment because the pit exit is quite blind, and as you saw, PJ came out right in front of me, and I just spammed the horn at him to let him know like I'm coming.
Matt, you're lagging for me.
And at this point, I went to pass Matt, and he was just teleporting for me, so I just asked him, as you heard in the background gameplay noise, to just give me the space, because I'm in the lead of GT2. I don't want to take any chances whatsoever. And it was about this point in the race where I started pulling a gap to GT Driver. Our gap was staying consistent the first few laps after his pit stop, but then he started getting into incidents and all that, like I just said a minute ago, and I was just able to slowly drive away from him, which was very good for my race.
K-Dog just did that.
And yeah, so it's been pretty good so far, and we're halfway through the race, and I have a healthy lead at this point. I have a big enough gap where I could pit at this moment in time and come right in front of GT Driver at this point. And after this point though, after I took GT Driver, my race was actually quite lonely, aside from passing the GT3s, the GT3 pack. After that, it was rather, quiet for me. I didn't have much going on. Aside from when the GT1s slapped me one more time, I think, after this. But after that, it was pretty lonely, as you see I have a 14-second gap to second place at this point, and that's counting the pit stop. So I have about 5-6 seconds on the road in the lead. And GT Driver had some incidents, and he ended up, I think it was in 4th or 5th at that point. So I have a really healthy gap, and all they have to do is just get past the remaining 2 GT3 drivers and just put in the lap times, or at least stay consistent with getting decent lap times. And here I have I struggle a little bit to lap obst, because the Banshee and the Schlagen were pretty close. But I do take it before the worst part of the quarry, and I hug the curb on the inside there, so I gave him enough space to adjust himself accordingly, so that I could just get past him with ease. Well, not really with ease, but just get past him without any worry. And we're at this point where I still have yet to take my first pit stop, and we're just about under an hour into the race. So that was the strategy I was running. Really, the first 3 races I took rather late pit stops, and so far it's worked out to my favor, because when you pit late, as you see, I have a massive gap behind me on the track, and that only car there is a GT1 car. And I was hoping I would pit and JJ would be able to just slap me and drive away. But I think he started just messing around on track without destroying people's races at this point, obviously. And he wasn't really racing at this point, at least, properly racing. So he didn't really he overtook me a few times because he would crash. I would overtake him again. He would, and this repeated a couple times. But in the end, it didn't affect my race whatsoever, so that's good. But as this happens, I believe Ryan comes up to lap me. Oh no, that's Brinka, sorry. But yeah, Brinka's coming up to lap me again for the third time, as he's coming up to lap JJ in the race. And as you see, my gap is growing to behind me in the overall lead, which is good. But at this point, GT driver does catch up a little bit on the road. I had about a 15-second gap, and then as you saw, I went down to about 13 or 12 seconds. But I come and take my pit stop at this point, and my plan was, actually not at this point, my plan was to come out just a few seconds ahead, and then if he did catch up to me, then I could at least defend my position. And the next lap, GT driver took his pit stop, and then I think he had another incident, and I ended up about 20 seconds ahead going into the last lap. And obviously I don't have any more highlights really to show other than Ryan lapping me, and this is the last lap.
GG, Ryan.
Because Ryan's on his last lap, and he's just come to lap me for the third time. And this is really it for my race at this point, and I had a really good drive, really. I was just consistent. I didn't crash once. Well, I did, but I did a little 360 that I forgot to show. But it only cost me 1 second. And I win my second race on the road, but my first race on the record in this season.
Yes.
And as you saw, Ryan won the race in GT1, and Diglett got his first race win in GT3. And that's about it for this round. Next race is just going to be terrible. Yeah, I have no expectations for the next race, but that is all for this one. So goodbye, I guess. I don't know. I'm not good at these outros.